Shalom, this is Avraham Shira from Nar Shalom in Jerusalem. Welcome to a little talk before the great day of the year, Yom Kippur, the day that includes all other days, the day the Kabbalah teaches that gives life force to all other days. Just like one tree can produce many fruits, so too one day can produce 365 other days. And Yom Kippur is such a day. It's a day of atonement, which of course in the New Age was always at one mint, that we want to get together on this day. So how is the idea of atonement and kapara in Hebrew, which really comes from the language of kofer, an exchange, a spiritual exchange takes place today? What's the connection between that and world peace? Well, Rabbi Nachman teaches us that on this day, we need to subdue part of our hearts. That there's a part of our hearts that wants to connect to Hashem and connect to the oneness and to connect to the goodness. And then there's a part of our hearts that really wants just to connect to what it wants and is not really concerned with anything else but its own needs. And this is not a new conflict that we all have experienced in the day we were born, between the needs of the great picture and all the needs of the little picture that we all find ourselves living in. So this day, Yom Kippur, is a day where the heart is able to be subdued. And what happens is that al yedei zeh nitbatel kol minei machlokot v'gashmir ruchaniyut. Well, when there is this nullification of all these individual wills, what happens? Well, we stop fighting. When we stop fighting, we start getting along. We start to see what we have in common. We understand that our common good does become our individual good. Now, certainly the communists had this idea long ago, and Marx wasn't the first one to think of it. And certainly the Russians and the Chinese and every other communist people took this idea to the nth degree. Well, it was an experiment. Whatever worked, what didn't. But we know that the principle is still the same, that there is individual will and there's general will. On Yom Kippur, we all enter into this covenant, this idea that we have to put a general will ahead of our individual will. And so by not eating and not drinking and not engaging in other activities that involve personal physical pleasure, we're able to focus on the general needs. And the general needs, of course, are to stop fighting and to stop arguing about all the little details of the picture. And this, of course, creates peace, a peace that transcends the individual. And this is certainly what the world needs now more than ever. And the world is more capable of destroying itself more than other. So one way to look at it is that there's this self-destructive tendency in a human being, that people can destroy themselves with all kinds of things, with drugs, with alcohol, with a gun, with anger. And they can also destroy themselves while trying to destroy others. Now, the Zohar Kadosh, the holy book of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, teaches that there are levels of evil. There's levels of evil that are extreme and those that are not as extreme. The most extreme evil is that level which will destroy others in order, even at the expense of itself. Right? There are those that will cause and do evil, but there are those that will be happy to die in order to effectuate destruction elsewhere. So this is the idea of a suicide bomber. This is the idea of a suicidal nation. Okay? This is the idea of a philosophy that it's my way is the only way, and if I don't succeed, then I'd rather wipe out the entire planet. And unfortunately, there are people that think this way. And we have to identify that level of evil. And the Zohar tells us an amazing thing. It says there's a level of evil that we cannot remove. There's a level of evil in our hearts that we cannot remove, that it can only be removed by it destroying itself. So the suicidal tendency in an individual is also, unfortunately, woven into various philosophies and various religions and various nations. So with all that said, we understand why Yom Kippur is so important, because it is the day where we say we are part of a collective. We are all going to fast together, and we are going to pray together for forgiveness and for atonement. Now, someone asked me, well, what if I don't sin? Why do I have to keep Yom Kippur? If I haven't sinned, why do I need to join in and not eat and not drink and go through that pain? And the answer is very simple. It's not about you. It's about your membership in the collective. And this collective is the Jewish people, and the Jewish people are part, of course, of the collective of nations, of the human race. And the principles of Yom Kippur apply also to all nations. The idea of atonement is very simple, really. It's a spiritual transaction. I give something and I receive something. I've taken something, I have to give it back. Now, what we're here talking about of giving and receiving, we're talking about spiritual energy. That when we do things that are against the Torah, against the Ten Commandments, then we automatically cause a diminution. Thank you. We make the light smaller. And when we make the light smaller, we're responsible for it. And so we have to give something back to return the light to creation, to our fellow man. Whether you live alone on an island or you live in a giant city, it doesn't matter. We're part of a collective soul. And that collective soul records and responds to all of us. So Yom Kippur is the day of bringing to balance the books between good and evil, and saying, I'm going to give up a part of myself, part of my ego, part of my desires for the greater good. And even if I'm perfect and I've never sinned, that doesn't matter. That only means that you have more power to do good. And this, of course, when everybody takes their own little wills and puts that aside and attaches to the great will, then we have the concept of world peace. And then we can really understand that we cannot do this alone, and we cannot afford to think of ourselves as self as an individual. Now, if you're a billionaire and you're sitting on the top of your mansion and you think this is all not part of you, then you're sorely mistaken. If you're a billionaire, that means God just gave you a lot of power to do good. And it's up to you to choose what to do with that power. And if you're a poor person who has no power and you live in a grass hut and you beg for your food every day, do not think that you have no power either, because your power to effectuate good is also great. It might not be with dollars, but it might certainly be with the positive power of your prayers and the power of your self-sacrifice to others. And that's what makes the impression in heaven. The impression in heaven is not because how many zeros you have in your bank account, but rather how much self-sacrifice you bring to any relationship. And so Yom Kippur is this day of saying, you know what? I'm going to sacrifice something. I'm going to give up my pleasures. I'm going to give up what I want to do today. And I'm going to give 25 hours to humanity, to the Jewish people, to my community. And ultimately, guess what? When you do it all that way, tremendous benefits come back to you. Now, you can think of it like you're creating a vacuum. When you create a vacuum, what happens? Things are attracted to it. It's just like a whirlpool in the ocean. The water spins and it creates this power that draws things to it. And so too, on Yom Kippur, we're creating that vacuum of will. Literally, I'm putting my will aside. That creates a vacuum of desire about each individual, and that draws power to them. Good power, the right power, not the negative power. And all the negative power, that's all the stuff that's swept outside the circle. Just like a tornado. Throws all the physical things outside. All the things that are external to us. All the personal ego that I bring to any situation. Okay, now on Yom Kippur, we are effectuating this covenant with Hashem because He gave us life in the first place. Now, if we don't believe in God, or we don't believe that God is giving us life every second, that's your prerogative, and that's certainly your free choice to choose that. But you know what? God said, keep my Torah and don't even think about me. There's a statement like that from the Midrash. God said, Halavai, the people would keep my Torah and not even worry about me. Because by keeping the law the way it's written properly, we automatically induce the holiness upon ourselves. When you just keep the 10 Commandments, you naturally become holy by that very simple set of activities. Now, the first commandment is acknowledging there's a God. So what does a person who doesn't know do? Well, you know what you do? You put it aside. You be honest. I'm not sure. Not sure is okay in heaven. Not sure means I'm open. Not sure about God means I'm willing to believe if I see things that convince me. That's fair enough. God understands that. So just ask him to be shown. Use Yom Kippur as a day to clarify your own faith. And say, God, show me that you're real. Show me that you're true. Show me that the Torah is the right way to go. And show me that the Jewish people are the right people to follow. Now, we're not out here trying to make followers. We're trying to just do the best we can, stay alive. But because the Jewish people have had this track record of pursuing the will of God for 3,500 years, and perhaps add on 500 for the patriarchs and their sons and grandsons, etc., we have a little bit of experience in the matter. And Rabbi Nachman teaches a very simple thing, that the world looks up when God saves the Jews. That when the world is coming down on the Jews like they did in the Holocaust, the world wasn't really interested. But when God saves the Jews and gives them a new country and gives them a new land and new prosperity and new successes, then the world starts to look up and say, wow, what's going on with these Jews? It said 3,000 years ago by Jeremiah and Yeshayahu and all the great prophets that we would come back to the land, and here we are. Now, if that's not a big enough miracle, if you need to see some magic, well, you can ask for that too. But I just look at all the nations that are represented in this country. You saw 100,000 people were at the Western Wall last night. Now, you can't get 100,000 Jews together anywhere and get along, but they did last night. And that's because of Yom Kippur. That's because they all came to the Kotel with a heart bent towards God, to removing my personal will and attaching myself to the greater will. Now, you put 100,000 people together in a soccer stadium and find out what happens, or in a bullfight, or anywhere else. I don't think you're going to have that kind of unity. So I think it's a wonderful example of how, when we can join the collective, we create peace. And the peace, of course, Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu Machzik Bracha Ela Al Yidei Shalom. That there is no vessel for peace, for blessing, except peace. If you want blessing in your life, you need to have peace. If you want blessing in your family, you need to get along with your wife and kids, or your husband and kids, etc. Because everybody wants blessing, and that means physical and spiritual blessing. That means spiritual insight. That means physical sustenance, prosperity of all kinds. And there's many kinds of prosperity. It's not just, electronic money in a bank account. Prosperity comes with perception. It comes with food. It comes with clothing. It comes with children. It comes with health is an aspect of prosperity. When you're healthy, sickness stays far away, just like the trees on our land. When the trees are healthy, the bugs don't bother with the trees. It's only when the tree is weak and ill on its own that the bugs start to attack the tree. And so too human beings, and so too communities. So if a nation's having trouble, like the countries like Venezuela and other countries that are under siege from all kinds of directions, perhaps they need to look at the way they've conducted themselves. And certainly Venezuela was known, unfortunately, it was led by a great anti-Semite a few years ago. Now look what's happened to them. And if you look at the history of nations that have gone against the Jews, it's not a pretty picture. They look big and strong when they're acting the way they act. But if you want to save your nation wherever you are and whatever you're doing, the last thing you want to do is hurt the Jews. Because the Jews represent something much bigger than all of us. The Jews represent the idea of a creator having a relationship with the human race. And when we get that firmly in our mind, things start to fall into place. And the Rebbe here says, Ikar Kagdalat Shmo Yitbarak, the greatest way that Hashem increases, expands his reputation in the world is not by holocausts and nuclear wars and all the things. The way God increases his name is Al Yedei Shebeyom Kippur Nitratzeh Hashem Yitbarak L'Israel. That on Yom Kippur, the world sees that God is favoring the Jews. And then from that favoring, God forgives sin. It's not for nothing that God favors the Jews. It's because we try to do tshuva. We try to repent. We try to give back those negative things that we've taken and caused. And he forgives. And when he forgives, guess what happens? He does great things. And so his reputation is expanded by us doing tshuva, because by us doing tshuva, we create a reason to receive blessing. And this works on an individual level as well. And God saves us from all the punishments and the evil decrees that might be out there. And, the problem with evil decrees are you really don't see them until they're coming. And that's a big problem. That's why God sent prophets through all the centuries. Because the prophets have the ability to see the spiritual activity and know that there's something coming, and we got to do tshuva. We got to repent. We got to fix ourselves before it's too late. So at this late date in human history, we just passed 5,780 human years according to the human calendar, according to the 365-day solar calendar. The archaeologists are going to tell you, the world is 3 billion years old. The universe is 12 or 13 billion years old. We have no problem with that in the Torah, because we understand that God's calendar is his business. And the human calendar is the one that's important for us. And God's calendar is made of numbers that we can't imagine. And when you get an idea about the expansion of time from the godly perspective, then what's 12 billion? You think you can count 12 billion stars? Think you can count 10 to the 21st stars that are in the known universe? I don't think so. So, part of man's problem is we're trying to take God's job, and we can't do that. But we can do our job. And our job is to give back on Yom Kippur all the things that we regret. And the regret itself is part of the payoff. The pain of regret, of feeling sorry for what we've done, that is the transaction. We're giving, that pain is like a cleansing of our soul, and that realigns us with the infinite light. So I think that every person, wherever you are, and whatever level that you keep of the Torah, that this is a special day for all days, and it's a day that's going to spread out through the year. And every day will have a taste, a spark of this day. And if we can just do a little bit of tshuva this day, then every day we can continue coming closer to our Creator, coming closer to the goodness that exists. And sometimes it's hidden, and sometimes it's hidden very deeply. But we have to know it's there, and our faith brings it out. And then when God's name is made greater, you know what? He's happy he created us. And he's happy with the human race. There's a debate in heaven before creation. And the angels told God, don't create man. He's going to go against your will. Aren't we good enough? The angels, they're so jealous that they don't want God to create humankind. The angels want to be alone with God in heaven because they do his will. And God said, no, I see that there's some good people are going to come along. It's worth it for me to create the whole entire human race. 6,000 years of people that go against his will, just for the few people who do his will. Now, when I heard this, I decided, I want to be on that team. I want to be on the team that God is happy he created me. And I don't want to be on the team that's denying, that's walking around denying the Creator and denying the goodness that is, and the miracle that is, and the amazing creation that we live in, and that we're here to fix. So our Yom Kippur blessing is that we all engage in the transaction, the spiritual transaction of giving up a little bit of our blood and a little bit of our fat and a little bit of our ego, and then we receive tremendous blessings throughout the year for that. So it should be a holy day a day, really, the rabbis say it's a day of joy. When we recognize that we're engaged in this wonderful relationship with the Creator, then it's very easy to give up and to say, I'm sorry. The only reason it's hard to say I'm sorry is because I don't want to be wrong. Because I got this illusory ego that I have to be right all the time. You know, I see it in therapy that the couples that don't make it are the ones that no one can say I'm sorry. I have to be right and you're wrong, and therefore I stay on top. And that ego doesn't wash in heaven. But when we can just say I'm sorry and let go, all of a sudden things start to happen. Good things happen. And the life force returns to the body. The life force returns to the consciousness and to the heart. And then we enter the new festival of Sukkot in a few days. And we'll be talking more about that in our upcoming classes on Facebook, on Patreon, on YouTube, and all the platforms. So God be with all of you. And give yourself a little time to let go and to join the unity that exists behind all this confusing and painful diversity. Yom Kippur, Kadosh, should be holy and a day of true joy, eternal joy. And we'll look for you on the other side. God bless all of you.